Exhibit analyzes the history of Smithfield and Solitude plantations and how these histories impacted the establishment of Virginia Tech. We hope to bring visibility to the historical interactions between white settlers and enslaved Black families on what is now Virginia Tech's campus. We promote a sense of awareness about the histories of Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. This exhibit addresses the issues of equity, diversity, and power as they relate to Virginia Tech by considering the histories of the privileged and the marginalized on the land that is now the campus before and after Virginia Tech's establishment. These narratives will paint a bigger picture that represents history of marginalization and mistreatment of people of color in Blacksburg. In our exhibit, several stories are told, including the narratives of the Preston family and the families enslaved at Smithfield and Solitude plantations.
Despite slavery not being as lucrative in Southwest Virginia, there existed thousands of enslaved people in the region. One of the most notable enslaved populations in Southwest Virginia labored on the Smithfield plantation in Blacksburg, Virginia, established by William Preston in 1774 prior to the American Revolution. William Preston and his descendants inhabited the property for the next 100 years. Records estimate that there were between 200 and 250 enslaved people housed on Smithfield Plantation from 1774 to 1865, and John Fraction was one of the first enslaved Africans brought to the plantation. In 1843, 91 people were enslaved at Smithfield, 13 of whom were a part of the Fraction family. Additionally, during this time, James Preston, William Preston's son, who was then the owner of Smithfield, passed away. Consequently, the enslaved were divided between the 4 of James Preston's children. The Solitude House, originally a one-room building erected around 1801, was purchased by James Patton Preston, then the governor of Virginia, in 1803 as an addition to the nearby Smithfield property. In 1833, James Preston's son, Robert Preston, took ownership of the Solitude property. In 1843, when his father passed, Robert Preston inherited several enslaved Fraction family members. By the 1850s, Robert Preston expanded the Solitude House to its present size and included a spring house and structures to house the enslaved population on the plantation. Furthermore, by then Robert Preston owned 24 enslaved people, increasing to 33 by 1860. These enslaved people include several generations of the Fraction family. At Solitude, the enslaved population labored across the 218 acres of land and worked to expand the Solitude House.
During the American Civil War, 2 of the Fraction brothers, Thomas and Othello Fraction, wrote a letter to Robert Preston, who since 1861 was serving in the Confederate Army, stating they planned to leave Solitude Plantation to fight in the Union Army. Despite Robert Preston's response stating they would be killed if they attempted to return, the Fractions successfully broke free from the Solitude Plantation and traveled to Greenville, Tennessee, where they joined the U.S. Colored Troops of Union Army on April 26, 1865. Following their service, the Union Army gave the Fraction brothers a leave of absence in February of 1866, which they desired to use to return to Solitude to visit their family. After hearing of the brothers' plan, Robert Preston wrote the Fractions a letter warning them that he would kill them if they returned to the plantation. The Fraction brothers responded, stating they would use their experience as soldiers to defend themselves if Preston chose to attack them. In March 1866, Thomas and Othello Fraction reached Solitude, but were warned that Robert Preston was on his way to confront them while visiting their father. Before the Fraction brothers were able to leave, they ran into Robert Preston, resulting in both sides pointing guns at each other. The confrontation resulted in Preston shooting Thomas in the leg and the Fraction brothers being imprisoned around a year. With the assistance of Freedmen's Bureau and the U.S. Army, the brothers were eventually released. Once the news that slavery was abolished in the United States, former slaves left the control of their masters to claim their newfound freedom. At Solitude, the Fractions left and traveled to Salem and Baltimore to start their new lives as free people. Without free labor, plantations failed to remain successful. In 1872, Robert Preston sold the Solitude property, including the house, farm buildings, dwellings for the enslaved, and the surrounding 250 acres to the state of Virginia for $21,250 to establish the Virginia Agricultural and Mechanical College, VAMC. Following its purchase by the state, Solitude served as a service center for veterans of World War II, faculty housing, a kindergarten classroom, and a playground. Finally, in May 1986, Solitude was added to the National Register of Historic Places, and in 1992, it was registered as a Virginia landmark. Following its restoration, completed in 2011, it serves as a classroom, office space, and historical structure, revealing the story of those enslaved at Solitude centuries prior.